In dealing with Avestic evidence, both direct and circumstantial, we have, by way of comparison, quoted or referred to some Avestic legends or myths in the foregoing videos. But the Avesta contains some important passages directly bearing upon the question of the original Aryan home in the far north, and migrations, therefore, to the regions watered by the Oxus, the Chaxardus, or the Indus, and is necessary to discuss these passages separately, because they not only confirm and supplement the conclusions we've previously arrived at by the examination of the Vedic evidence, but constitute what may be called independent evidence, pointing out to the same results. As regards the antiquity of the Avesta, it is superfluous to adduce any proofs in this place, for it is admitted by scholars that the Vedas and the Avesta are but two branches of the same parent stream, though the latter may not be as well preserved as the former. To use a Vedic phrase, the sacred books of the Brahmins and the Parsis are the twin books of the Aryan race, and they can therefore be safely taken to supplement each other whenever it's necessary and possible to do so. This character of the two books is well exhibited with regard to the subject at hand. We've seen that while there are numbers of passages in Vedic literature which speak of long dawns, continuous darkness, or sacrificial session of 10 months, we have no text or legend which directly refers to the home in the far north, or to the cause or causes which forced the ancients to abandon their primeval home and migrate southwards. But fortunately for us, the Avesta, though not generally as well preserved as the Vedas, contains a passage which supplies the omission in a remarkable way. And we will discuss this passage at some length in subsequent videos. The Avestic legends and traditions quoted in foregoing videos show that a day and a night of 6 months each were known to the ancestors of the Iranians, and that the appointed time for the appearance of Trishja before the worshipper, after his fight with Apwasha, varied from 1 to 100 nights, thus indicating that a long darkness extending over 100 nights was also known to the forefathers of the worshippers of Mazda. The stoppage of the flow of waters, the movement of the sun in winter, as described in the Farvardan Yasht, have also been referred to, and has shown that the custom of keeping a dead body in the house for 2 nights, 3 nights, or a month long in winter until the floods begin to flow must be ascribed to the absence of sunlight during the period when the floods, as well as light, were shut up in the netherworld by the demons of darkness. All these traditions have their counterparts in Vedic literature, but the Avestic tradition regarding the original home in the far north and its destruction by snow and ice stands by itself. Though in the light of Vedic evidence discussed in the previous videos, we can now clearly show that it has historical basis, and that it preserves for us a distinct reminiscence, howsoever fragmentary, of the ancient Aryan home. This tradition is contained in the first 2 Fargads, or chapters of the Venidad, or the law book of the Mazdayazians. They have no connection to subsequent chapters of the book and appear to be incorporated into it simply as a relic of old historical or traditional literature. These 2 Fargads have not failed to attract the attention of Zen scholars ever since the discovery of the Avesta by Antikil. Many attempts have been made not only to identify the places mentioned therein, but also to draw historical conclusions therefrom. Thus, Hirine, Rode, Lassen, Pictel, Bunsen, Hogg, and others have recognized in these accounts of the Venidad half historical, half mythical reminiscence of a primeval home in the countries known to the followers of the Avesta. When these Fargads are composed, Professor Spiegel at first took the same view as Rode, but later retracted his opinion. On other hands, Kuipert, Briel, Darmestader, and others have shown that no historical conclusion can be drawn from the description contained in the first 2 chapters of the Venidad. and this view seems to be now mainly accepted. But it must be borne in mind that this view was formulated at a time when Vedic evidence in support of the Arctic theory, set forth in our previous videos, was entirely unknown, and when the existence of an Arctic home, in ancient times, was not regarded as probable, even on geological grounds, man being believed to be post-glacial, and the Arctic regions always unsuited for human habitation. Discoveries in geology and archaeology have, however, thrown a flood of new light on the subject, and if the interpretation of the Vedic traditions noticed in previous videos is correct, it will, we think, be readily admitted that a reconsideration of the Avestic tradition from a new standpoint is a necessity, and we should not be deterred from undertaking the task by the recent verdicts of scholars against the views regarding the historical character of the first two Fargads of the Vanidad. The first Fargad of the Vanidad is devoted to the enumeration of 16 lands created by Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of the Iranians. As soon as each land was created, Angra Mainyu, the evil spirit of the Avestas, created different evils and plagues to invade that land and made it unfit for human habitation. Thus were the 16 creations of Ahura Mazda and the 16 counter-creations of Angra Mainyu. And the first Fargad of the Vanidad contains a description of all these creations and counter-creations, stating in detail how each good land was created by Ahura Mazda and how Angra Mainyu rendered it unfit for human residence by creating in it some evil or plague therein. The Fargad is too long to be quoted here in full, and therefore we will borrow Moore's abstract of the same, prepared from versions of Spiegel and Haug renderings with the aid of his translation of the Vanidad in the Sacred Books of the East series. The paragraphs are first marked according to Darmestader and then according to Spiegel, as noted on the screen. Ahura Mazda spake to the holy Zarathustra. I formed into an agreeable region that which before was nowhere habitable. Had I not done this, all living things would have poured forth after Aryanya Vayo. I, Ahura Mazda, created as the first best region Aranya Vayo of the good creation, or according to Darmestader, the good river Daitya. Then Angra Mainyu the destroyer formed in opposition to it, a great serpent, and winter, or snow, the creation of the Devas. There are these 10 months of winter and 2 of summer. I, Ahura Mazda, created as the second best region Ngao, or plains, in which Sugda is situated. Thereupon, in opposition to it, Angra Mainyu, the death-dealing, created a wasp, which is death to cattle and fields. I, Ahura Mazda, created the third best region, Mauru, the mighty, the holy. Here and in most of the following cases and counter-creations of Angu Mayu are omitted. I created as the fourth best region the fortunate Bhakti with a lofty banner. I created as the fifth best region Isaya, situated between Moru and Bhakti. I created as the sixth best region Hoiru, abounding in houses, or perhaps water. I created as the seventh best region Vaikarita, where Dujek is situated, or according to Dharmister, of evil shadows. And in opposition to it, Angira Mayu, the destroyer, created Parika Kanathadi, who clung to Karisapa. I created the eighth best region, Urva, full of pastures. I created as the ninth best region Kanenta, a river, and Verkana. And I created as the 10th best region the fortunate Haravati. I created as the 11th best region Hetumant, the rich and shining. I created as the 12th best region Braga, with 3 fortresses or races. I created as the 13th best region Chakra, the strong. I created as the 14th best region Varina, with 4 corners, to which was born Thrateona, who slew Azidahaka. I created as the 15th best country Hapta Hendu, from the eastern to the western Hindu. In opposition, Angra Mainyu created untimely evils, pernicious heat or fever. I created as the 16th and best people who live without a head on the floods of Ranga, or according to Hogg, on the seashore. There are, besides, other countries, fortunate, renowned, lofty, prosperous, and splendid. Spiegel, Hogg, and other scholars have tried to identify the 16 lands mentioned in this description. The following tabular statement sums up the results of the investigation of these scholars in this direction. The old Persian and Greek names in the above table are taken from the inscription of the Achaemenid kings and the works of the Greek writers after the overthrow of the Achaemenid dynasty by Alexander the Great. They show that at least 10 out of 16 lands can still be identified with certainty, and if so, we can safely say that the account in the first Fargad is real and not mythical. But in regard to the land mentioned first in the list, there has been difference of opinion among Zen scholars. The Aryana Vayu is the first created happy land, and the name signifies that it is the birthland. Vayu, seed, from the Sanskrit Biya. The birthland of the Aryans or Iranians, or the paradise of the Iranian race. Was this mythical region, or a real country representing the original home of the Aryans? And if it was a real country, where was it situated? This is the first question, which we have to answer from the evidence contained in the first two Fargads of the Vanidad. And secondly, we have to decide whether the 16 lands mentioned were successive countries occupied by the ancestors of the Iranian race in their migrations from the original home in the north. The Fargad says nothing about migrations. It simply says that so many lands were created by Ahura Mazda, and in opposition thereto, Angra Mainyu, the evil spirit of the Avesta, created so many different evils and plagues which rendered each land unfit for human residence. It is inferred from this that the Fargad does not contain an account of successive migrations, but merely gives us a description of the countries known to the ancestors of the Iranians at the time when the Fargads were composed. In other words, the chapter is geographical, not historical, containing nothing but a specification of the countries known to the Iranians at a particular time. And it is argued that it would be converting geography into history if we were to take different countries to represent the successive states of migration from the primeval home, when not a word about migration is found in the original text. Professor Darmestetter further observes that the enumeration of the 16 lands begins with Aryana Vayu by the river Vagui Daita and ends with the Ranga, which corresponds with the Vedic Rasa, the mythical river that divides the gods from the fiends, and that as the Vankui and the Ranya are originally celestial rivers that came down from heaven, like the two heavenly Ganges, to surround the earth, the one in the east and the other in the west. Aranya Vayu and Ranga must be taken to denote the eastern and western boundaries of the countries known to the ancient Iranians at the time when the Fargad was composed. Spiegel also takes the same view and places Aryana Vayu in the farthest east of the Iranian plateau, in the region where the Oxus and the Chaksardis take their rise, and Darmestetter seems to quote with approval the identification of the Ranga or 16th land in the commentary of the Vanidad with the Avastian Irum or Roman Mesopotamia. The whole Fargad is thus taken to be a geographical description of ancient Iran, and Darmestetter, at the end of his introduction to the Fargad, observes, "It follows hence no historical conclusion can be drawn from this description. It was necessary that it should begin with the Vahugi and end with the Ranga. To look to it for an account of geographical migrations is converting cosmology into history." Bunsen and Hogg, on the other hand, maintain that the Aryana Vayu represents the original home of the Iranians in the far north, and the countries mentioned in the Fargad must therefore be taken to represent the lands through which the Aryans passed after leaving their ancient home. The first question, which we have therefore to decide, is whether Aryana Vayu was merely the easternmost boundary of ancient Iran, or whether this was the primeval abode of the Iranians in the far north. In the former case, we may take the Fargard to be merely a chapter on ancient geography, while, if it is found impossible to locate Aryanaveo except in the far north, the countries from Samarkand and Sugda to Haptahendu, or the Panjab, mentioned in the Fargad, would naturally represent a route taken by the ancient Iranians in their migration from the ancient home. Everything thus depends on the view we take of the situation of the Aryanaveo. We shall therefore first see if there is anything in the Avestic description of the land which will enable us to determine its position with certainty. It may be observed at the outset that the river Vangui is not mentioned in their Fargad along with the Aryanaveo. The original verse speaks only of the good Daitya of Aryanaveo, but it's doubtful if Daita denotes a river in this place. The Zend phrase shown above, which Dharmestader translates as the Ariana Valleo by the good river Daitya, is understood by Spiegel to mean the Ariana Vale of the good creation, while Hug takes it as equivalent of Ariana Vale of good capability. It is therefore doubtful that the Daitya River is mentioned along with the Ariana Vale in this passage. But even supposing that Dharmestader renderings are correct, he gives us no authority for identifying Daitya with Vangui. The Bundhaj mentions Ve, Vangui, and Daiti, Daitya, as two distinct rivers, though both seem to be located in Aryan Ve, or Aryanya Veho. We cannot again lose sight of the fact that it is not the Vangui or Ve alone that flows through Aryanaveho, but that the Ranga or Arag has the same source and flows through the same land. Thus, the very beginning of the chapter 20 of the Bundhadish, we read that Arag and Ve are the chief of 18 rivers and that they flow forth from the north, part from Alburz and part from the Alburz of Ahur Mazd, one towards the west, that is the Arag, and one towards the east, that is the Veh River. The Bundahish further informs us that the Veh River flows out from the same source as the Arag, and Dr. West, in a footnote, observes that both these rivers flow out from the north side of the fountain of the sea, which is said to be on the lofty Hugar, a portion of Albruz. But even according to Bundaj, the Vangui is therefore the eastern, and the Ranga, the western river in the northern part of Alburz, or in other words, they represent two rivers in one country, situated in the north, one flowing towards the east and one towards the west in that region. It would therefore be, to say the least, unsafe to infer from this that the Aryanaveo represents the easternmost country, because the name Ve or Vangui was in later times attached to the easternmost river in Iran. For parity of reasoning, we can well place the Aryanaveo in the far west, inasmuch as the name Arag or Ranga is given, as stated by Dharmestader himself, and in later times, to the westernmost river. It's again a question why Ranga should be identified with the Caspian Sea or some western river in Iran. The Fargard does not say anything about the situation of the Ranga. It simply states that the 15th land created by Ahura Mazda was Haptahendu, and the 16th was on the floods of the Ranga. Now, if Haptahendu is identified with Sapta Sindhu, or the Panjab, why take a big and sudden jump from the Panjab to the Caspian Sea to find the Ranga River? Ranga is Sanskrit Rasa, and in the Rig Veda, a terrestrial river by the name Rasa is mentioned along with the Kuba, the Kurumu, and the Gomadi, which are all known to be affluents of the Indus. Is it not, therefore, more likely that Ranga may be the Vedic Rasha, tributary of the Indus? If the context is any guide to the determination of the sense of the ambiguous words, the mention of Haptahendu as the 15th land shows that Rash, the 16th, must be sought for somewhere near it, The point is pretty well settled when we find the Rasa actually mentioned in the Rig Veda, along with other tributaries of the Indus. The identification of Ranga with the westernmost river is therefore at best doubtful, and the same may be said of the Vangui, which, by the by, is not mentioned in the Fargads at all. But Dharmestater's reasoning does not stop here. On the strength of this doubtful identification, he would have us believe that the ancient land of the Aryanaveo was situated in the same region where the river named Vangui, or Ve, in latter times was said to flow. But the reasoning was obviously erroneous. The names of the two rivers in the primeval home may have been subsequently transferred to real rivers in the new settlement. We cannot infer therefrom that the country through which these new rivers flowed was the original site of the Aryanaveo. It's a well-known fact that persons migrating from their motherland to new countries often name the places they come across after the names of places familiar to them in their motherland. But on that account, no one has ventured to place England in America or Australia, and it is strange how such a mistake could have been committed by Zen scholars in this case. For even if a province or a country in Central Asia had been named Aryanaveo, we could not have had located the original home in that province, just as the abode of Varuna cannot be placed in the land named Varena, which is the Zen equivalent of Varuna. The whole of Dharmestater's reasoning must therefore be rejected as unsound and illogical. But for the preconceived notion the original home of the Iranians cannot be placed in the far north, I think no scholar would have cared to put forward such a guess. There are express passages in the Avesta which describe in unmistakable terms the climatic characteristics of Aryanaveo. As far as we're aware, no valid reason has yet been assigned why we should not treat this description as mythical, and have recourse to guesswork for determining the position of the primeval home. Thus, at the beginning of the first Fargad, we are told that Aryanaveo was the first good and happy creation of Ahura Mazda, but that Angramanyu created it into a land of 10 months winter, 2 months summer, evidently meaning that the time when the Fargad was composed, it was an ice-bound land. The winter of 10 months' duration therefore naturally points to a position in the far north, at great distance beyond the Jaxartes, and it would be unreasonable to ignore this description, which is characteristic only of the Arctic regions, and relying on doubtful guesses, hold that the Aryanaveo was the easternmost boundary of ancient Iran. As the passage where 10 months' winter is described as the present principal climatic characteristics of Aryanaveo, which is very important for our purpose, we will give translations of the same by Dharmestater, Spiegel, and Haug.
The first of the good lands and countries which I, Ahura Mazda, created was the Aryanaveo by the good river Daikya. Thereupon came Angramanyu, who is all death, and he counter-created by his witchcraft the serpent in the river, and winter, the work of the Devas. There are 10 winter months there, 2 summer months, and those are cold for the waters, cold for the earth, cold for the trees. Winter falls there with the worst of its plagues. The first and best of regions and places have I created, I who am Ahura Mazda, the Aryanaveo of the good creation. Then Angramanyu, who is full of death, created in opposition to the same, a great serpent and winter, which the Devas have created. 10 winter months are there, 2 summer months, and these are coldest to the water, coldest to the earth, coldest to the trees. After this, to the middle of the earth, then to the heart of the earth comes the winter, then comes the most evil. As the first best of regions and countries, I, who am Ahura Mazda, created Aryanaveo of good capability. Thereupon in opposition, Angramanyu, the death-dealing, created a mighty serpent, and snow, the work of the Devas. 10 months of winter are there, 2 months of summer. 7 months of summer are there, 5 months of winter there were. The latter are cold as to water, cold as to earth, cold as to trees. There is midwinter, the heart of winter, and there all round falls deep snow. There is the direst of plagues.
It will be seen from the above translations that they all agree in the main points, to which that the Ariana Veho was the first good land created by Ahura Mazda, that severe winter and snow were first introduced into it by Angra Mainyu, and that, after the invasion of Angra Mainyu, there were 10 winter months and 2 summer months in that land. The only difference between the three versions is that while Darmestader and Spiegel regard the last sentence, and these are cold for the waters, and so on, as part of the original text, Hogg regards it as a subsequent addition. All translators again agree in holding that the statement 7 months of summer are there and 5 months of winter was definitely a later insertion, but we shall take up this question later. For the present, we're concerned with the statement that 10 months of winter are there and 2 months of summer. It will be seen that there is no difference on this point in the three renderings given above. Another important fact mentioned in the passage is that the prolonged duration of winter was the result of Angra Mainyu's counteraction, meaning thereby that before the invasion of Angra Mainyu, different climatic conditions prevailed in that region. This view is further strengthened by the consideration that the Iranians could never have placed their paradise in a land of severe winter and snow. Bunsen has therefore rightly observed that the Ariano Veho was originally a perfect country and had very mild climate until a hostile deity created a powerful serpent and snow, so that only 2 months of summer remained while winter prevailed the rest of the year. In short, the passage in question speaks of a sudden change in climate for that original home. A change converted the paradise into a kind of ice-bound land with long and severe winters. If we therefore want to know what the land was like before the invasion of Angra Mainyu, we must reverse the climatic conditions that were obtained after the invasion, and suppose that this cradle of Iranian race was situated in the extreme north, where long cool summers of 10 months and short mild winter of 2 months originally had prevailed. It was Angra Mainyu who altered this genial climate by means of glaciation and rendered it unbearable to man. The description of 2 summer months after the invasion, that is, these were cold as to the water and cold as to the earth and cold as to the trees, shows that after the glaciation, even the summer climate was unsuited for human habitation. We have seen that the passage in question indicates a sudden change in the climate of Ariana Veho, converting 10 months of summer and 2 months winter into 10 months severe winter, 2 months cold summer. In the past, such a statement or proposition would have been regarded not only bold, but impossible or almost insane, for geological knowledge of the time was not sufficiently advanced to establish the existence of a mild climate around the North Pole in ancient times. It was probably this difficulty which stared Zen scholars in the face when they declined to place Ariana Veho in the far north, despite the plain description which clearly indicates its northernmost position. Happily, recent discoveries in geology and archaeology have not only removed this difficulty by establishing on scientific grounds the existence of a warm and genial climate near the North Pole in interglacial times, but have proved that polar regions were invaded at least twice by glaciation, which destroyed their genial climate. Thus, it's now a settled fact that the Arctic regions were once characterized by warm and short winters and genial long summers, a sort of perpetual spring. And this condition of things was totally upset or reversed by the advent of the glacial period, which made winters long and severe and summers short and cold. The description of the climatic changes introduced by Angra Mainyu into Ariana Veho is therefore just what modern geologists would ascribe to the glacial epoch. When the description so remarkably and unexpectedly is corroborated by the latest scientific researches, we fail to see on what grounds we can lightly set aside it as mythical or imaginary. If some Zen scholars have done so in the past, it was because Geological knowledge was not then sufficiently advanced to establish the probability of the description contained in the Avesta. But with new materials before us, which go on to confirm the Avesta's description of the Arya-Navajo in every detail, we shall be acting unwisely if we decline to revise the conclusions of Zen scholars, which were arrived at many years ago on insufficient materials. When we look at the question from this point of view, we have to place the site of Arya-Navajo in the Arctic regions, where alone we can have a winter of 10 months in the present day. We can escape from such conclusion only by denying the possibility that the passage in question contains any traditional account of the ancient home of the Iranians. This, of course, seems to have been adopted by some Zen scholars of the day. But with the Vedic evidence set forth and discussed in previous videos before us, we need not have any of those apprehensions which have hitherto led many Zen scholars to err on the side of caution and moderation. We have seen that there were grounds for holding that the ancient Indo-European year was a year of 10 months followed by a long night of 2 months. In other words, it was the year of 10 summer months and 2 winter months. It is exactly the same as the one which prevailed in Arya-Navajo before the Happy Land was invaded by the evil spirit. The word for summer in Zen is Hama, the same as Sanskrit Sama, which means a year in Rig Veda. A period of 10 summer months mentioned in the Avesta would therefore mean a year of 10 months sunshine, or 10 Manusha Yuga, followed by a long wintry night of 2 months, described in previous videos. It may be urged that the Vedas does not say that the 2 winter months were all dark. We therefore have no authority for converting 2 winter months into 2 months of continuous darkness on those grounds. A little reflection will, however, show that the objection is utterly untenable. In order to have a winter of 10 months at present day, we must place Arya-Navajo in the Arctic regions. Once we do so, a long night of 1, 2, or 3 months follows then as a matter of course. This long night will now fall in the middle of winter of 10 months, but before the last glacial epoch, or the invasion of Angra when there was a summer of 10 months in the Arctic region, the duration of the long night and that of the winter of 2 months must have been co-extensive. This is an important difference in the description of the paradise of the ancients, as it was before the last glacial epoch. The long night characterized these regions, before the glacial period, as it does at present. But when the winters were short, they corresponded with and were confined only to the long night. Well, at the present day, since the winter of the Arctic regions lasts 10 months, the long night falls in the middle of such winter. The description of the Arya-Navajo in the Vedas, therefore, naturally leads us to infer that 10 months sunshine or summer, followed by 2 months dark winter, represented the climatic conditions of the place before the invasion of Angra, who converted summer into winter by introducing ice and snow into the land. I've already referred to the maximum period of 100 nights, during which Trishta fought with Apuasha, and the custom of keeping dead bodies in the house for 2 nights, 3 nights, or a month long in the winter until the waters and the light, which stood still in winter, again began to flow or come up, showing the period was one of continuous darkness. These passages, taken in conjunction with the aforesaid description of Arya-Navajo, clearly establishes the fact that the paradise of the Iranians was situated in the extreme north, or almost near the North Pole. And it was characterized by long, delightful summers and short, warm but dark winters, until it was rendered unfit for human habitation by the invasion of Angra, or the advent of the glacial epoch, which brought in severe winter and snow, causing the land to be covered with an ice cap several hundreds of feet in thickness. There is one more point which deserves to be noticed in this connection. We've seen that the description of the Arya-Navajo quoted earlier, the old Zen commentators have added what is believed to be an inconsistent statement. That is, there are 7 months of summer and 5 months of winter therein. Dr. Hogg thinks this paragraph was a latter addition. and must therefore be taken with the 5 months of winter. But both Spiegel and Darmestader, as well as the commentator, are of the opinion that the phrases form a part of the original text and must therefore be taken to refer to the 2 summer months. And this view seems to be more reasonable for a later insertion, if any is more likely to be a short one than otherwise. The only addition to the original text thus seems to be the statement, "It is known that there are 7 months of summer and 5 of winter," which must be taken as referring to the climatic conditions which obtained in the Arianabejo before the invasion of Angra Mainyu, for the later reduced the duration of summer to only 2 months, which again were cold as to the water, the earth, and the trees. It's been shown earlier that as the Arianabejo was originally a happy land, we must suppose that the first climatic conditions therein were exactly the reverse of those which were introduced into it by Angra Mainyu, or in other words, a summer of 10 months and a winter of 2 months must be said to have originally prevailed in this happy land. But Zen commentators have stated that there were 7 months of summer and 5 of winter therein, and this tradition appears to have been equally old, for we read in the Bundahish that on the day Ahura Mazda, the first day, of Avan, the winter acquires the strength and enters into the world, and on the auspicious day Ataro of the month of Din, the 9th day of the 10th month, winter arrives with much cold, and until the end, the auspicious month of Spendarmad, winter advances through the whole world. And on this account they kindle a fire everywhere on the day Ataro of the month of Din, and it forms an indication that winter has come. Here the 5 months of winter in the Arianabejo are expressly mentioned to be Avan, Ataro, Din, Varhuman, and Spendarmad, and we are told that the Raptiga is not celebrated during this period, as Raptin goes underground during the winter and comes up from below the ground in summer. The 7 months of summer are similarly described in the same book, as extending from the auspicious day of Ahura Mazda, the first of the month of Farvind, to the auspicious day Aniran, the last of the month of Mitros. It seems from this account that the tradition of 7 months summer and 5 months winter in the Arianabejo was an old tradition, and the Bundhadish, in recording us, gives us the climatic condition of the ancient home, and not as supposed by those which some writer saw in his own day. For in the 20th paragraph of the same chapter, 12 months and 4 seasons are enumerated. The season of winter is there said to comprise only the last 3 months of the year. We have seen elsewhere that the order of months in the ancient Iranian calendar was different from the one given in the Bunadish. But whatever the order may be, the fact that the prevalence of 7 months summer and 5 months winter in the Arianabejo seems to have been traditionally preserved in these passages, and the old Zen commentators on the Venindad appear to have incorporated into the original text, by way of what may be called a marginal note, in their anxiety to preserve an old tradition. We have thus 2 different statements regarding the climactic conditions of Arianabejo before it was invaded by Angra Mainyu. One, that these were 10 months of summer and 2 of winter, the reverse of the conditions introduced by Angra Mainyu, and that the other, traditionally preserved by the commentators, that there were 7 summer months and 5 winter months therein. It is supposed the 2 statements are contradictory, and contradictory they undoubtedly are, so long as we do not possess the true key to their interpretation. They are inconsistent if we make the Arianabejo the easternmost boundary of ancient Iran, but if the paradise is placed in the circumpolar regions in the far north, the inconsistency at once disappears, for then we can have 7 months summer and 10 summer months at the same time in different parts, the original home of the Iranians. We have seen in the discussion of the Vedic evidence that the legend of Aditi indicates 7 months summer or sunshine, and the legend of the Dashagbas a sacrificial session period of sunshine of 10 months. It's been pointed out that between the North Pole and the Arctic Circle, the sun is above the horizon for any period longer than 7 and less than 12 months, according to the latitude of the place. It is therefore nothing strange, extraordinary, and consistent if we get two statements in the Avesta regarding the duration of summer in the primeval home. We need not assume the commentators have added the statement of 7 months summer simply because the description of 2 months summer and 10 months winter didn't appear to them suitable to the first land of blessing. It was not possible that they could have misunderstood the original text in such a way as to suppose that the climatic conditions introduced by Angra Mainyu were the conditions which obtained originally in the Arianavejo. We must therefore reject the explanation which tries to account for this latter insertion on the grounds that it was made by persons who regarded the description in the original as not suited to the first created happy home. If the original text is properly read and interpreted, it gives us a summer of 10 months in Arianavejo before Angra Mainyu's invasion, and the statement regarding the summer of 7 months refers to the same place and time. We have the same thing in Rig Veda, where the sun is once represented as having 7 rays and once as having 10 rays, meaning 7 months and 10 months of sunshine, both of which are possible only in the Arctic regions. 2 Avestic traditions stated earlier must therefore be taken to represent Arctic climate conditions prevailing in the ancient home in the far north, and the correctness of the explanation is proved by the discussion. With regard to the custom of kindling a fire on the 9th day of Din, or the 10th month, noticed in the Bunadish, it seems to us that, instead of taking to be an indicator that winter has come, it's better to trace its origin to the commencement of winter at the time in some part of the original home. For if a fire is to be kindled, there is a greater propriety in kindling it to commemorate the commencement of winter rather than the expiration of 2 of the 5 winter months. If the custom is so interpreted, it will imply that the year of 9 months and 10 days was once prevalent in some part of the Aryan home, a conclusion well keeping with the ancient Roman year of 10 months. But apart from this suggestion, there is a striking coincidence between the Vedic and Avestic tradition in this respect. According to the Bunhadish, the year is divided into 4 seasons of 3 months each, as shown. The 40th day of Sharad, or autumn, would therefore represent the 10th day, Avan, of Avan, and the Vedic statement discussed earlier that Indra's fight with Shambhara commenced on the 40th day of Sharad agrees well, only with a difference of 10 days, to the statement in the Bunadish that the winter of the Arianavejo commenced on the month of Avan, the 2nd month in autumn, with thus very close resemblance between the Vedic and Avestic tradition about the end of summer in the original Arctic home, and the corresponding Roman and Greek traditions have been previously noticed. In short, a year of 7 or 10 months sunshine can be traced back to the Indo-European period, and since its double character can be explained only by placing the original home in the circumpolar regions, we're inevitably led to the conclusion that the Arianavejo must be placed in the same region. The Avestic account is by itself plain and intelligible, and apparent inconsistencies would have been explained in a natural way long ago if Zen scholars had not created unnecessary difficulties by transferring the site of this paradise to the east of ancient Iran. Under these circumstances, it's needless to say which of the 2 theories regarding the position of Arianavejo is correct, for no one would accept a hypothesis which only enhances the confusion in preference to the one which explains everything in a natural and satisfying manner.